You can turn to Luke chapter 14. It's the parable of the great banquet found in Luke 14, 15 to 24. When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I have just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. And then the owner of the house became angry, and he ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there's still room.' Then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" I'm going to invite Pastor Oliver up to preach.
Thanks, Allie. Hey, good afternoon. We got it. It's so good to be with you. Welcome here to Garden Church. If we haven't met, I hope we get a chance to after the service. Allie mentioned, today we begin a new series on the parables, and I'm really excited for it. The parables are visual stories and sayings of Jesus told to communicate truth. And Jesus told a lot of parables. He told a lot of stories. He was like a master storyteller. He communicated by utilizing visuals and stories and our imagination even. And we do this all the time in everyday conversation. We utilize images, metaphors, analogies to kind of make the point we're trying to make. We'll say things like, "That comment was a slap in the face," right? And there's a visual attached to that communicates feeling and emotion. Or we'll say, "My mind feels like a browser with 47 tabs open," right? It's like, there's a lot going on up there. And actually, 47 tabs open is a good week for me. I love my tabs. You just never know when you're gonna need that tab from 3 weeks ago, that Google search. And so that's my brain most of the time. But Jesus would often tell parables to communicate truth. It's not the only way he communicates. It's not the only way he teaches, but it is a favorite of his. Like, he told 47 parables throughout the Gospels. And it begs the question, why? Like, why speak in parables? Why speak in stories and visuals? Why communicate that way? Some people suggest Jesus is making like complex ideas more simple, like he's putting them into everyday language. But that's not always the case, is it? Like, sometimes Jesus' parables get your head like they mess with your brain. He doesn't always make it more simple, or at least it doesn't always seem that way. Take, for example, the parable of the yeast. Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough." You're like, okay, I got it, I think. What does it mean? Like, it's a simple story, but it is anything but simple to understand. So why speak in parables? I think there's at least 2 compelling reasons why Jesus so often taught in parables. First, the primary message that Jesus came to preach was about the kingdom of God. Mark captures this in his opening lines of his gospel, where he says, Jesus came preaching that the kingdom of God was at hand. And Jesus taught primarily about the kingdom of God. In fact, many of his parables begin just like the one we read. The kingdom of God is like a farmer who sows seed, or the master of a vineyard, or a master with servants, a treasure in a field, so on and so on. These are stories and metaphors from everyday life in that time. And the implication being that the kingdom of God is not purely like an abstract idea or like a spiritual idea, but that it is also an everyday idea. Maybe put another way, that it is something to experience. It is something to live in and live out, like the farmer who sows seed or the man who finds treasure. Put another way, the kingdom of God is something for us to embrace and respond to. And that's what a good story does. It pulls you in with your mind, with your imagination, with your emotions even. It evokes a response. But secondly, Jesus told parables to give us a new perspective. To give us a new perspective about the kingdom of God or about the God of the kingdom. Sometimes his parables comfort or encourage, but often they unsettle us, like they disrupt us. They get us thinking, they get us rethinking and reimagining what the kingdom of God is like and what the God of the kingdom is like. And many of his parables follow a particular pattern. They have three movements. First, Jesus tells a story. This is a story of something familiar for the listener. A shepherd who loses a sheep, or a man who works in a vineyard. These are familiar, everyday, even kind of earthy stories for those who would have heard Jesus speak. The audience he spoke to would have understood what he was getting at. He spoke in their language, which is great for them back then, and a little bit harder for us today, because the challenge is most of us don't struggle with losing one of our sheep or dealing with a servant of ours. And so we have to hear these stories in their original context, in a first century context. The parables have a story, but they also almost always have a surprise, an unexpected twist or turn in an otherwise familiar story. Just a show of hands. How many of you actually enjoy a surprise? Like surprise parties, surprise events, surprise phone call from mom? Okay, I'm gonna say about 25%. I was dating Carissa at one point, and we were doing long distance. And I had this great idea. Like, I was coming to visit her in the summer, and I had this great idea that I would surprise her a day early. And you know, you're dating and you're trying to like win everyone over. You're trying to schmooze the parents, like the grandparents, the friends, like everyone. You're just trying to like be the guy. And so I thought like, I'm gonna surprise her. I'm gonna come a day early and it would be great. And so that's what I did. I came to Kelowna, I drove out a day early, and I was sitting at her parents' island as she arrived back home from a long day. And she came in and she walked around the corner and she saw me sitting with her parents at the island. And there are three words that came out of her mouth. What the heck? And then I think that was followed by, why are you here? And I knew in that moment that I had made a grave mistake. We haven't done a lot of surprises since then. Not everyone likes a surprise, but most of the time they do make for a good story, at least. And Jesus' parables would often include a surprise, like an unexpected twist in the plot of the story he was telling. And the surprise leads us to a scandal. And by scandal, I'm not talking about something you read in the tabloids or something that would like, be weird or strange. By scandal, I'm talking about something that disrupts us, something that gets us to pause, something that unsettles us, almost even offends us, something that disorients our understanding about the way things are or the way things should be. He tells stories filled with surprises that lead to scandals. So story, surprise, and a scandal. And so first, the story. And in this case, the story of a great banquet feast. Jesus' parable is prompted by a statement from someone sitting next to him, who says, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Now, there's some biblical context here that's helpful to understand what's going on in these first verses. Throughout the Old Testament, A banquet feast was often used as like a metaphor or an image of salvation, of rescue. Most notably in Isaiah 25, it says this, "On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats and the finest of wines. On this mountain, he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth." So this imagery of feasting with God at a great banquet represented salvation, this coming day when God would wipe death out altogether. And this is used all throughout the Old Testament. Think of Psalm 23. David says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Like there's a rescue, there's a salvation motif that goes on throughout the Old Testament. It's a motif for salvation or the kingdom of God in general. And undoubtedly, the pious guest sitting next to Jesus, as he kind of blurts out, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God," surely knows this background and surely assumes he will be present at that feast when all is said and done. And that remark prompts Jesus to tell a story. A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. So two things here. First, if a man was hosting a banquet, he was a wealthy man. He would send out invites, most likely to other wealthy guests. They were like distinguished guests, maybe his peers even, guests of honor. And in that day, you would issue 2 invites. Your first invite was like a save the date. You know how sometimes we do this with a wedding? It's like save the date, mark it on your calendar. You don't get a lot of information, but you know that there's an event coming. The first invite was like that. It was like a save the date. You knew that there was a banquet coming, and you knew that you were invited. You didn't know what time, but you knew the day. And that first invite would have come with some kind of response. You would have said yes or no to that first invite. Because the host of the banquet needed to know how much food to prepare. Are we cooking a small chicken, multiple chickens, like a sheep, a cow? Like how big are we going for this extravagant banquet? And so they wanted to know. So you would respond to that first invitation as it came to you. And then on the day of the banquet, you would get your second invitation. And this would come in the afternoon when the meal was almost ready, like of the same hour, you would get a second invitation. And we see this in the text. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, "Come, for everything is now ready." So far, everything's kind of going as expected for those listening. They get this. The invitations have been received, accepted. There's a delicious roast that's been slow cooking all day. And now is the time for these distinguished guests who have already said yes to come and join this banquet. And here is the surprise. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, "I've just bought a field, and I must go and see it. Please excuse me." Another said, "I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me." Still another, "I just got married, so I can't come." Even in our culture, like to bail on a last-minute invite after you've already accepted is awkward, like maybe a little bit embarrassing, maybe a little bit, you feel a little bit guilty. But in that day, to make an excuse at the very last minute was insulting. But it's not just that there was an excuse, it's the kind of excuses. You know the difference between a good excuse and a bad excuse, right? I've been in church ministry for a little while. I've heard my fair share of excuses last minute. Some excuses are good, right? I woke up with a fever. It's great, no problem. Stay home, please. My car just broke down. Totally get it. It happens to my car all the time. And then there's like bad excuses, right? Like I gotta walk my dog, or like I gotta let my cat out or something. Anytime there's a pet involved, there's a difference between a good excuse and a bad excuse. And the first person says this, I've just bought a field and I must go see it. But for those listening, this is a ridiculous excuse because nobody would ever go and buy a field before ever seeing it. No one buys a field without knowing exactly what it looks like, the terrain, the paths, the history of the field. It would be the equivalent of us saying, I just bought a house over the phone and I'm gonna go check it out, see what I got. Like it's a ridiculous excuse. It's ludicrous, it's laughable. And the second excuse is similar. I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Again, this is a laughable excuse, and here's why. Nobody would have bought a team of oxen without first going to try them out. You would go and you would watch them work. Do they pull together? Because if they don't pull together, they're going to be useless to you. So you would go, you would check them out before you negotiated a price, before you ever got to buying them. You would know them. Are they healthy? What condition are they in? Again, this would be like the equivalent of me saying, I can't make it for dinner. I just bought 5 used cars and I'm going to go see which ones I got. Like, it's totally out of the picture. It is not even a legitimate excuse. And the audience for Jesus would have been kind of chuckling a little bit at this point. And then comes the final excuse. I just got married and I can't come. Now, some people wonder if what's meant is like, I just got married today. But the reality is no banquet host would have planned a great banquet feast on the same day of a wedding. It would not have happened. And so really, there's no good reason for this person to skip out on the banquet feast that they've already said yes to. This is less of an excuse and more like a pure rejection of the host's invite. And then comes the scandal. The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Sir, the servant said, what you ordered has been done, but there's still room. Then the master told his servant, go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. The scandal of this parable is twofold. It's about those who are there, and it's about those who are not there. Seeing an empty house, the host begins to invite anyone and everyone. He says, go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town, bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. This is not just like another group of distinguished guests. This is not a circle of friends or peers. This is an undeserving group. This is a marginalized group, a forgotten group. It might have been the very first and the last invitation to a great banquet that they would ever get. Because a great host would not do this. They would invite their peers, their friends. They wouldn't fill their house with anyone and everyone. Invites to a banquet were selective and exclusive, but not so in this story. Not so at this banquet, not so with this banquet host. And seeing that there's still room, the master says, go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. The host of this banquet has now thrown off all restraint. He is inviting anyone and everyone, even those outside of the city, to his banquet. These are not just well-known, undeserving guests who need an invite. These are now strangers. These are just anyone. It's an open invite to anyone and everyone. Why? He tells us, because he wants his house full, so that my house will be full. He wants his house full. He is not stingy with his invites. He's not checking for tickets at the door. His invite is for anyone and everyone. More specifically, his invite is for those who know they cannot repay him. a number of years ago, Carissa and I were getting to know this other young couple, and we thought, like, we should have them over for dinner. We like to have people over for dinner. We had them over for dinner. It was great. And about a week later, they invited us over for dinner. We thought, like, that's great. I mean, we just hung out with them, but that's fine. And we went for dinner at their place, and it was great. And then about 2 months later, we thought, we should have them over for dinner again. And so we invited them for dinner. They said yes, and they came for dinner, and it was great. And then like 2 days later, they invited us over for dinner. And at that point, we realized something else was going on here besides just pure friendship. Like somehow our relationship had taken like a transactional turn. They invited us, we invite you. You make us food, we'll make you food. We'll just kind of like keep it even because we like it that way. Nobody likes to feel indebted to anyone else. This is the culture we live in. But friends, God does not relate to us in that way. He does not relate to us based on what's fair. He does not relate to us based on what is transactional. And that is good news. The poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame never in a million years would be able to repay the host for his generous offer. And that is the point. And just notice like the context of this invite. The invitation is to a feast, a great banquet feast. Jesus likens the kingdom of God to a feast. And what is a feast? It's a celebration. It is an abundance of food and drink and relationship, and there's no agenda. It's a celebration of joy. It is a party. Are you with me? This is not like a church AGM. This is not like a long, drawn-out Bible study that is, stale chips and like bad coffee. This is the best food, the best drink, all for you, laid out for you. Life with God in his kingdom is like showing up to a party. And Jesus is the host. The author Dallas Willard once said, undoubtedly, he, God, is the most joyous being in the universe. And sometimes I think we just get the wrong idea about God, like that he is a killjoy and that following him is like restrictive and it's like boring, and we do it out of duty and we do it out of obedience and we like grit our teeth and sometimes we just try really hard. But the kingdom of God is like arriving to a party where God is the host. He's been slow cooking a roast all day. He's excited, he's giddy as guests begin to arrive. He's joyful, he is throwing a party, and you're invited. Not because you have something great to offer him in return, not because you will ever be able to pay him back, but because that's what the God of the kingdom is like. He gives us what we do not deserve. He loves to give us what we do not deserve. It's his favorite thing to do. He prepares a table for us. He's a generous host. And he's determined to fill his house. He is not content without you there. Verse 23 says, go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. The word compel here is important. In the Middle East, it was custom to refuse an unexpected invite, particularly if you were of a lower social rank. Someone might be starving, but if they got an invite to eat, if they got an invite for dinner, it was tradition, it was expected that they would decline, they would refuse that invite. And it was like a social custom. And we do this a little bit in our culture when someone tries to buy us coffee. Like there's this like social interaction that happens. Like, I'll get your coffee this time. And we almost always say, no, I'll pay. And then they say, no, I got it. And you're like, okay, fine. Right? Like there's this like little interaction that happens almost every time. Or we like go back and forth like, no, I'll pay and I'll pay and I'll pay. And there's like this war that wages at the till. Sometimes it takes a bit of convincing, but that's not necessarily for us because it's customary. I think more likely it's because we're just not very good at receiving something we haven't earned. Maybe for some of us, we're uncomfortable with receiving something we haven't earned. But the implication of this story is that the guests who come need to be convinced because the offer is so good. It's too good to be true. It's too unexpected. It can't be genuine. It can't be for me. But Jesus is determined to fill his house. And so he compels you. He pleads with you even to come in and dine with him because the invitation is indeed for you. He wants you there. The scandal of this parable is that those typically on the outside looking in, those who assume they'll miss out for all sorts of reasons, those with no status or resume or any ability to repay the generosity of the host, find themselves at a great banquet table, and Jesus is the host. And that's good news for you and I. Like there's a seat for you at his table. And maybe today you might hear Jesus compelling you to come and dine with him again. Maybe for the first time, maybe for the 100th time, you would just hear and feel Jesus compelling you to come into relationship again, to come into a relationship not based on transaction or what's fair, but based on the extravagant grace and love of God. He wants his house full. But the parable ends with this statement. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. See, the scandal of this parable is not just that the most unlikely and undeserving guests find themselves dining with Jesus. It's also that those who assume they'll be there miss out. They miss out on the invitation of a lifetime, life with God in his kingdom. And notice why. It's not because of evil behavior, not because of hostility towards the host, not because they don't like banquets or eating. They're just preoccupied. The problem here is not rebellion, but indifference. And isn't that also our problem? Your good things can keep you from God. Your good things can keep you preoccupied and busy. So preoccupied and busy, you miss out on a life in the kingdom, life with God. A field, 5 oxen, and a marriage could be career, possessions, and a relationship. All good things. All good things that keep us preoccupied from the main thing. We make good things ultimate things, and somewhere along the way, we can become indifferent to the invitation of a lifetime, life with God. Jesus is not exclusive in his invitation. He invites everyone and anyone. He invites you and I. He wants his house full, but we do have to respond. And if we miss out, it's of our own doing, not his. The door isn't slammed shut randomly. It is just walked past repeatedly. It's possible to miss out altogether on the life he offers. It's possible to be so preoccupied, so indifferent, we miss out on the life in his kingdom. And in this series, over the next 10 weeks, we'll be talking about what the kingdom of God is like and what the God of the kingdom is like. And I want to invite you not just to learn with your mind, not just to listen with your ears, but to respond. Because Jesus invites you into life in his kingdom. There is an invitation for you into an everyday life with him, walking with Jesus now and for eternity. And the invitation stands for anyone and everyone who will receive it. But we do have to receive it. We do have to respond. Will you take your place at his table? The response is up to you.